Mr. Mayor, we meet again.
Good to be with you.
Yes.
We were last together at South by Southwest in Austin. A bit bigger crowd than this, I think.
I think it was basically standing room only. This was not this most recent one, but the one before. A lot of people were very. I think you had a bigger crowd than Elon Musk did.
Are there any London journalists here?
The thing with mayors is they often play better away from their hometown.
Well, thanks, mate.
That's
God.
your,
You need to disprove that theory, by the way.
Yes, there you go. So obviously we're here at Ad Week, so let's talk about advertising. I have noticed that this is an issue that you've really taken up, the issue of diversity in advertising and representation. Why is this important to you?
Well, if you think about this industry, advertising, marketing, you set the tone. The creative minds, and it's really important to bear in mind, actually, as the mayor, I've got a huge amount of influence because Transport for London, we have one of the most valuable advertising spaces in the world. And I think that brings with it a responsibility. And so it does concern me, and I say this not simply as the father of two daughters, but, as a human being and as somebody who cares about fellow citizens, when you've got adverts that leads to an unhealthy and unrealistic view of what the body should look like. When you have got a situation where people are being influenced to have a certain body shape that's not achievable. Or, for example, when you see a situation where we have a ticking time bomb when it comes to obesity and overweight children, and yet there are junk food adverts which children and their parents are exposed to, particularly in poorer parts of London, which is leading to them buying more junk food and becoming more obese and overweight. Similarly, we did a survey recently, UCL for us, and what was interesting about the survey was the number of women who said they didn't think that adverts depicted who they were. And so what I did is put my money where my mouth is and had a competition and invited brands to compete. And then the winning entry is receiving £500,000 worth of free advertising on the Transport for London estates, and it's really important that we have positive images of Londoners, and it's good for you because it'll mean that they'll think you're relevant, they'll relate to you, and buy the stuff you advertise.
Yeah, on the subway in New York City, I see all kinds of advertisements for, boob jobs, Brazilian butt lifts, and things like that. So it's refreshing to step on the subway in the underground here and see different images up there. Is this something that you sort of knew when you took office, that you would have all of this advertising real estate, and sort of how did you light upon it as a way to enact policies that mattered to you?
One of the things in London is, the role of mayor is relatively new. We're sort of, the Mayor of London's only been in existence for, I think, 18 years.
Ken Livingstone was the first.
Yeah, that's right, Ken Livingstone, then this other guy's name I forget. And so Ken was in nappies, the middle guy was an adolescent. And then we've got, adulthood. But compared to our American friends, very, very infancy. And so we're still learning the levers that I've got, the powers that I've got given to me by Parliament, but also my convenient powers, the ability to influence from the bullet pit of City Hall. And it's getting that balance right. And so we're still learning, and so there are some things I've not got the power to do, but I can influence directly or indirectly. And so, look, this is me not telling people how to behave, but it's saying and by the way, the response from the advertising community has been fantastic. Working collegiately and in partnership, saying, you know what, Sadiq, we get what you're trying to do. We'll work with you. We know you're not trying to ban things for the sake of it. We're responsible companies. We love being in London, and they've been working with us. We've got a steering group on, and they're part of that. We speak to the Committee of Advertising Partners. We work closely with them and stuff. And I think it's really important to take the power you have and use it in a responsible manner. And I think, as mayor, if I can help speed things along, I'm happy to do so.
Do you think the industry is doing a good enough job of policing itself and living up to the values that it claims to hold?
Well, I think the reality is that, unlike other industries, what you say matters because you decide the pictures that go up, you tell the narrative, you tell the story. And it's when you speak to actors and people involved in that world, they often say the most important role is the scriptwriter and the casting agent, because they define the narrative and the storytelling and stuff. And the same goes with you guys in the creative sector. You are so important. One of the reasons why, I genuinely say this, by the way, is Mayor Eric Garcetti from LA, or Mayor Bill de Blasio, or Governor Eureka from Tokyo. What I say is the mayor of the great city in the world. One of the reasons why we are great is our culture and that sort of that energy and that dynamism, and you're part of that sector. The creative industries is the fastest growing sector in London, more than finance and construction and the other things. It's the growth is twice the growth of the wider economy, and it's not just the benefits you bring financially to us. It's also the stories you can tell and the diversity you can portray. And so that's one of the reasons why we gave this free space to the winning entry. It's Holland and Barrett, by the way, who won the competition. Mothercare also had a good entry. And the adverts you'll see from them on the TfL estate does depict real women. But also the good news for them is customers, which is what Londoners are, can relate better with that. And so you benefit because you're more relatable, more relevant to consumers. Consumers benefit because they're not being body shamed, not having these unrealistic images being thrown at them and stuff. And I think it's a win-win.
Do you think that creative industries can help Brexit-proof London to a certain degree?
I live in hope. We need something. We need a lifeline. We need a lifeboat. But I think one of the things that those running the Remain campaign failed to do. I was very critical of that campaign. I wasn't involved in it. I got involved in a couple of debates towards the end. It was based on Project Fair. I think it is possible, and I know this from your president, to win campaigns based upon fear and based upon scaring people to vote a certain way. I like to win campaigns being positive, being hopeful. And I think the creative industries, advertising and marketing, could have helped in relation to the storytelling. I'm a firm believer, though, in the substance being important. I think you can tweak and finesse and polish a story, but it's got to be us, the architects of the campaign, to tell that story. And so if there is a public vote, another referendum, and those of us of wiser heads involved in the campaign, I'll be saying, listen, use some of the abilities and skills there is in the creative industries and the advertising and marketing sector to make sure we get the message across. I've got this saying in City Hall, which is when I first became mayor, people would talk about hard-to-reach communities. And I said, hold on a sec, there's no such thing as hard-to-reach communities. We're hard to reach. And you've got to flip it on its head and make sure that we are easier to reach to Londoners. And the same goes with the storytelling around the referendum campaign. I think the reality is those in charge of the Leave campaign were able to tell a story in a certain way and reach parts of the country the Remain team couldn't do. And I think if there was another public vote, you'd have a huge role to play. I think as far as Brexit's concerned, who knows what's going to happen?
Well, how has the likelihood of a revote changed given the events of the last week, do you think?
I can't think of anything that I've been involved in which has been so poorly organised, so chaotic, with such catastrophic consequences. And you will all have experience in your lives, people you've met, people you've worked for, people you know who are incompetent. Theresa May takes the biscuit. I mean, and I say this as somebody who, I campaigned to Remain and I was devastated at the vote, but I offered to help the government in relation to getting the best deal possible, the least worst deal, and met government ministers regularly, including the Prime Minister. I met the relevant government minister, David Davis, on 8 occasions. Taken with me, by the way, on one occasion, somebody from the creative industries to explain what sort of deal would be the least harmful to London. Because you've got to be pragmatic and you've got to be a democrat and accept the verdict of the British public, whatever you may think about it. What was clear during the course of last summer was that the deal Prime Minister May negotiated was a bad deal. Was a bad deal. And when you look at the bad deal she had versus the still possibility of a no-deal Brexit, neither are things the British public who voted to leave the EU voted for. They're a million miles away from that. And in those circumstances, I think the British public should have a say. Do they accept the deal negotiated by Prime Minister May with the option of remaining in the EU? And I think for those people who argue that's undemocratic. I can't think of anything more democratic than giving the British public a say. What are you scared of? And now we know the terms upon which we will leave the EU. Now we know this isn't the land of milk and honey. Now we know the consequences for the NHS, for the creative industries, for the wealth and prosperity of our children and grandchildren. We can then choose: do we want to, accept the deal negotiated by Prime Minister May, or do you want to remain in the imperfect EU? And I think that should happen. And there's, I understand, going to be a few people walking this Saturday through London to ask for a public vote. And, many people here may be joining that People's Vote march.
The leader of your party is basically on record saying that we should have a general election rather than a revote. It's convenient, gives him a shot at becoming prime minister. Is there daylight between your position and his on that?
Never, as journalists here. So look, as a member of the Labour Party, you can understand why what we want is a general election. Why? Because the current government are a shower. They're making a mess of negotiations. They're making a mess of the NHS. They're making a mess of our schools. They're making a mess of the economy, and on and on. And, we think the British public should have a say in who should be the government. And, the Labour Party could then take over, form the government and make a better deal of a variety of things, not least Brexit. If we can't get a general election, as far as I'm concerned, the next best thing is for the British public to have a say. Do they accept the terms of the deal negotiated by Theresa May with the option of remaining in the EU? Of course, in a perfect world, want to remain in the European Union. But I think the only way to do that is not for us politicians to say no to the British public's vote in the referendum in 2016, but to say, you know what, now that you know what the terms of exit are going to be, do you want to leave the European Union or do you want to remain?
As this process has dragged on, have you been able to kind of tabulate and add up what the cost for London specifically has been? And then more intangibly, what has the cost for London been?
One of my biggest concerns with the result on June the 23rd, 2016, was what it meant for our city. And so on the Friday after the Thursday, I spent all day speaking to various people, global CEOs, the Governor of the Bank of England, many, many other people around the world, to reassure them that notwithstanding the referendum result, London is and always will be open. What do I mean by that? We're going to carry on being open-minded, outlook and pluralistic. And it's really important that we do that, because my biggest fear was an impression being created that the referendum result meant we were somehow going to stop being open-minded, outlook and pluralistic. We were going to become inward-looking, protectionist and xenophobic. And it's really important that we don't do that, and we make sure that the world is reassured. With a campaign, 3 simple words: London is open. And that's been my biggest concern. Why? Because actually one of the reasons why many of you who are not from London are here is because you love our city, you love our people, you love our ecosystem, you love our open-mindedness, you love our values, the theatres, the music, the food, and the mayor, I hope, and on and on. And there's an author, a London author, Zadie Smith, who's now in New York. Zadie once described London as a state of mind. And my biggest concern about the referendum result is not businesses leaving or people leaving. That is a concern, but people thinking that our state of mind has changed. And so, we've been keen to make sure people appreciate that's still our state of mind. And so, yeah, of course, I'm concerned when, a business decides to open a new office in another city in the European Union because it's a gateway to a massive market of 500 million. Of course, I'm concerned when somebody who was going to start development in London is pausing because they want to see which way Brexit goes. Of course, I'm concerned when the numbers of people who are coming from the EU working incredibly hard in the creative sector, in construction, in social care, in hospitality, aren't coming in the numbers they were coming before. And so, one of the jobs I have is, as mayor, and it's not given to me, the powers aren't given to me by Parliament, but it's something that I think it's important that I do, is just to reassure not just businesses but people as well. And so from City Hall, we've set up a particular website to assist EU citizens, and they're Londoners, by the way, EU citizens who may need assistance. We're doing outreach work with various Londoners of EU origin. We've provided a separate assistance, a portal and a hub for businesses to give them the advice and assistance they need. But it's an issue I wish I wasn't dealing with, because it's distracting me from the bread and butter stuff, affordable housing, affordable and reliable public transport, more police officers to keep our city safe, fixing the air quality in London, investing in young people for them to have the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. Those are the really important stuff national government and mayors are being diverted away from because of the distraction of Brexit.
I mean, I think that image of London as this open, cosmopolitan, prosperous place, it's something that many of the people in this room have contributed to building that image. Kind of cuts both ways, though, right? Because I think that one of the big factors driving the Leave vote was this us versus them, and in some ways it's the North versus the South, the cities versus the small towns and countryside, but I think even within London, right, there are different Londons. So how do you sort of shift the picture that people outside of London or in parts of London that did vote to leave see the city and its role in the country?
And this is a really important question, because this goes to the core of, in my view, why people vote to leave the European Union, why people vote for the guy that's your president at the moment.
Are we not saying his name?
Well, there are certain things that, do I have to? If I do, I'm worried he might tweet. I'm not sure what time it is in White House. He might
He's been very active lately.
Yeah, one of his children may tweet. I mean, God, it'd be better than the other Trumps. Anyway, and what it is this. I think there are lots of people, even within London, within our country, across mainland Europe, in parts of America, in Australia, who haven't enjoyed the fruits of globalization, haven't enjoyed the fruits of our economies, and haven't seen the benefits that many of us have seen. And that's a problem. And so we've got to make sure they share in some of the fruits of globalization, particularly at a time when we know manufacturing is reducing both in America and the UK for reasons that we can discuss. And that means giving them the opportunities, the helping hand to have their potential fulfilled too. So in London, you're right, there are pockets of London where there's huge poverty. Although I'm proud London voted to remain in the European Union, 40% still voted to leave the European Union. Often, that vote was a proxy for other concerns they have, the lack of access to affordable housing, lack of access to a decent school, the inability to get an older relation to get the healthcare they deserve, and long waiting lists. And so lots of things we're doing in City Hall, which wasn't done before. We've set up schools for Londoners, and what this is giving young Londoners, particularly in deprived communities, black, Asian, minority ethnic, white working class, women, access to the skills for the jobs that are being created that weren't there before. We're doing work in schools to make sure, particularly in poorer parts of London, they get the assistance they need. We're building a record number of genuinely affordable homes, social rent homes, homes where you pay a London living rent, homes that are affordable to Londoners. So when they see these homes being built, which up until now have been bought by, to a large extent, foreign investors, using our homes as gold bricks, they can now see these homes that are being built for them, their children, their nephews and nieces, and it's really important. And so, I think my profession has got to accept responsibility for the reason people vote the certain way they do, and I've got to recognise that actually we do appear out of touch. It's not. I don't think it's a question of urban versus rural, or necessarily cities versus towns and other parts of the smaller cities and rural coast. I think it's a question of politicians in the centre and understanding that other parts of the country don't ensure the benefits. I think we are, as a country, the most centralised democracy in the Western world. I think we've got to give power away. I think in America, I'm speaking to friends in America, similar challenges there. You speak to colleagues in France and friends in France, similar challenges there in relation to the perception of Paris from people in other parts of Paris. And the same goes for other parts of the world. And I think we as Democrats have got to realise that in democracies, people are running towards some parties who've got some really obnoxious and xenophobic and hateful views.
Well, are you surprised at the speed with which that alienation has run to the corner of xenophobia?
I don't think it's been quick. I think it's been going on for some time now. I've been talking about this. We talked about this at South by Southwest last year in Austin. My concern about, you've got a situation now where social media can amplify messages so quickly and all around the world. That wasn't the case before. And if social media companies aren't being more responsible about the messages being amplified, then government may have to step in. And so there's two issues. One is the message. Two is the message carrier and the amplification of the message. And I think for some time now there's been a sense of cynicism and frustration by ordinary people about their lives not improving. And so look, if you're somebody in any part of this country and you voted for Labour or Conservative over successive elections, both broadly speaking pro-European parties, the leadership anyway, and you've got somebody coming along and saying, you know what, all your problems are caused by the European Union, and the solution lies in leaving the European Union, you think, you know what, I've tried those guys and I've tried those guys, why not try Brexit? And the same goes in America with Trump, and the same goes around the world in relation to people who win elections who, I think, play on people's fears rather than addressing them. It's very difficult when you're a politician to have the time to explain things. I mean, there's a great quote from Harold Wilson, who's a Labour Prime Minister, who said, one of our roles as politicians is to be teachers. Well, I'm not being funny. If you're doing a radio programme or a TV programme, or you're doing a response to an article in a newspaper, you get, if you're lucky, a minute or 120 words. You can't explain things and be a teacher in those circumstances. I don't mean in a patronising way. And I think we've not explained some of the challenges, but also how we find solutions. And that's led to a situation where you've got an attention span that's 140 characters. You've got broadcast journalists on radio and TV who behave in a way that they're copying America, the sort of clickbait journalism, which is leading to quick fixes. And my concern is, if it is the case, we'll leave the European Union. If it is the case that in the space of a few months and a couple of years, it isn't the land of milk and honey, those people are going to get very, very angry. And those people who are responsible for this will have left the pitch. And that's what I meant by Boris Johnson.
Oh, we got his name. Do you worry about rising right-wing extremism in London? The issue of xenophobia. I mean, obviously, horrific events that took place in New Zealand, but this is something that we're seeing across the globe.
We are. We are. I get regular briefings, and I'm not giving away any state secrets here from, counter-terror leads and the Met Police Commissioner. And over the recent past, there has been an increase in far-right activity. There has been an increase in relation to, people attempting to commit acts of terror from the far right. Some people call them white supremacists. They are far-right terrorists and extremists, and we've got to realise, actually, I'm clear from my experience in this area that there is almost you could put a mirror between so-called Islamist terrorists and far-right terrorists in relation to some of the views they have. So both these groups think it is incompatible to be a Westerner and to be a Muslim, which is why both groups hate me, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Somebody who has got, Western liberal values, very proudly so, but somebody who is proudly practicing Muslim, because it messes with their head. And you see this around the world, but you're seeing a rise. And one of my criticisms of mainstream politicians, not politicians on the periphery or people on the periphery, is my profession and other opinion formers are using language which is giving credence to some of their views and normalising some of their views, making them think it's respectable, saying things that in previous years weren't said. So when I was growing up, the N-word was never, the N-word, the P-word, the Y-word was said sometimes, but over the course of me growing up, they were taken out of nobody said them. Now, that's one of the advantages, by the way, of political correctness. Political correctness has led to the N-word, the P-word, and the Y-word not being used in common parlance, right?
I mean, another word for political correctness is manners, right?
Or decency.
Yeah.
Or decency,
Yeah.
right? And so
treating people with dignity.
Well, in this country, what happened, and I think you saw the same with the presidential campaign, but during the referendum campaign, people who had these views, but they were buried away because people realised it was not acceptable to use this language or to behave in this sort of manner, thought that they had permission to do so. And it normalised the sort of behaviour that shouldn't be normal. There's a great Martin Luther King saying, which is, you can legislate to change the way people act, but not the way people think. But over a period of time, by changing the way people act, it will change the way people think. I think what the referendum campaign in this country, presidential campaign in America, some of the actions, I'm afraid, of your president in amplifying messages of hate has sent a signal to these people that it's okay to feel this way. And that includes, by the way, talking about the clothes Muslim women wear. That includes, by the way, attributing criminality to a complete ethnic group because there are some heinous criminals who are paedophiles who happen to be Asian, and I could go on. And I think there's a responsibility on those of us who are decent to call these mainstream politicians out and say it's not on.
It's interesting because I think that, I think your analysis is really right. It does seem that post 9/11, a kind of soft and increasingly hardening Islamophobia crept into the edges of the mainstream. Here it's a little bit different, I think. In the U.S., you see it in the kind of new atheists on the left, and then, of course, in increasingly on the right. And it's sort of the dinner party test, right? I mean, can you express these views? And I wonder that if it's not a kind of Trojan horse for smuggling in all kinds of other odious beliefs. Not that Islamophobia on its own isn't terrible, but once you kind of open that door, other things can also push through it.
It's the other. The other could be a Jewish person. It could be somebody who's LGBT+. It could be a woman. It could be somebody who has a disability. It could be somebody who's a Muslim, and on. And, I thought very carefully before my South by Southwest speech last year, because it was the first time I'd talked about some of the stuff that I get since I became mayor. And many who are Londoners here will know that during my mayoral campaign, according to experts, not me, I've not talked about it much. The campaign ran against me was the most divisive, according to political commentators, the most negative, the most racist that anybody can remember, right? Why don't I talk about it? The reason I don't talk about it is because I don't want to put off young people from getting involved in mainstream politics, because they've got to be on the pitch. An example yesterday, we had a meeting at a mosque, an interfaith event, where there are many young Londoners there of Muslim faith, and they were talking about their experience growing up in London. And one person said, she was thinking about a career in public life, but when she sees some of the stuff some of us receive, she's not sure whether she should. Another one said, and I think she was joking, that because she told her mum that the homosexual was going to be there, and her mum said, "Be careful, he may strip you of citizenship." Another one said that I'm scared to wear a headscarf now because I'm worried about because of the racial abuse I receive. Should I change my beliefs? And I could go on and on and on. And so, I'm hoping that some of the stuff that mainstream politicians say is because they don't understand the consequences, and if they are confronted with the consequences of their language, they'll change their behaviour. But a part of me thinks they do it deliberately, because they know that by playing on people's fears, by using a megaphone rather than a dog whistle, they can win elections and get votes. And that's why it's so important, those of us who understand the power of the media, I mean the creative industries, use the power you have constructively, because you have an ability to put out messages that can rebut and confront some of the negativity that exists, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, and other forms of hate.
I put out a call on Twitter asking people what I should ask you. And a lot of people wanted to hear about a big problem that's plaguing London, which is knife crime. You've been very successful at portraying London as an open, safe city. But at the same time, knife crime is on the rise, and it does give a bit of a black eye to the idea of what London is. Yeah. What's driving it, and what have you done?
Yeah, well, let's first deal with the facts as they are, which is really important, and then we'll get to the solutions. Before I get to the facts, anybody here who's been the victim of violent crime or knows somebody who's been the victim, it's awful. I meet so many, because I asked to do so, bereaved families, grieving mums and dads. Whenever somebody is the victim of a stabbing, I get in contact with the family and say, if once they're ready, I'm really happy to meet with them. And the grief never stops. And this thing about time heals is not true. Time doesn't heal. It goes on forever. So, not just because I'm raising my children in London, not just because I'm a Londoner, but, I think one of the jobs I've got to do is make sure our city is safer than it currently is. But the facts are important. You know, violent crime across England and Wales has been going up for the last 5 years, since 2013, 2014, across England and Wales. I'm not excusing criminality in London. I'm not saying it's good enough what's going on in London, but it's going on across the entire country. Our city is bigger than Scotland and Wales put together. So not unsurprisingly, the largest numbers of violent crime are in London. But actually, when you compare our population versus other parts of the country, we're nowhere near the top. I'm not, by the way, undermining or belittling any violent crime. It's very, very serious in London. We've had too many fatal knife stabbings. I'm clear that with the resources that we have, we're not going to solve this. We aren't. What people don't realise is 80% of the funding for our police service comes from central government. Youth services funding comes from central government, and other preventative services come from central government. Over the last 8 years, we've lost thousands of police officers, thousands of community support officers, thousands of police staff, dozens of youth centres have closed down, hundreds of youth workers have lost their jobs, thousands of young Londoners who used to have a youth club to go to haven't. Mental health services have seen massive cuts, schools have seen massive cuts, social services have seen massive cuts, health services have seen massive cuts, and those cuts have consequences, which is why you're seeing across the country, in my view, an increase in violent crime. The causes are complex. Deep-seated problems from social alienation, inequalities, mental health, school exclusions, poverty, not excusing criminality. These are some of the deep complexes. So one of the things that I've done is studied parts of the world where they've been successful at fighting violent crime. Glasgow being one, Chicago to some extent, Boston to some extent. And what's clear to me is we need a public health approach to fighting violent crime. What does that mean? That means treat violent crime like you would a public health emergency. You deal with the infection, stop the infection spreading, but stop an infection occurring in the first place. That means the police have a role to play. So I've used City Hall funding and business rates to get more police in, nowhere near what we used to have. Have targeted police work, a City Hall funded violent crime task force, taking thousands of knives off our streets, carrying out targeted intelligence-led stop and search, making arrests, but also giving police officers body-worn videos. We've had the biggest rollout of body-worn videos of any city in the world. Why is that important? Because you want police officers to have the confidence to carry out stop and search, knowing there's a recording of that interaction. So if a complaint's made, there'll be a recording to, frankly speaking, exonerate the police officer. But also, you as a young Londoner should have the confidence to know the police, for very good reasons, might need to stop and search you. You may have no weapon on you, but this body-worn video gives you the confidence to know that it's being recorded. We're invested in young Londoners as well with the new Young Londoners Fund to give young Londoners constructive things to do, because we don't want the infection to occur in the first place. And we've set up a violence reduction unit, bringing together the NHS, the police, schools, local councils, civic society, the faith community, to try and together grapple with this issue. There's an African proverb: it takes a village to raise a child. I think it'll take us as an entire city to grapple with this issue of the increase in violent crime. We can't do it by ourselves, but according to the Commissioner of the Met Police, we're starting to see in London now some stabilisation. You aren't seeing that in the rest of the country. It's no consolation you're the victim of knife crime if you've lost a loved one. We are starting to make progress, but according to the Glasgow experience, the Chicago and Boston experience, it may take some time before we have a transformative effect.
You talked a little bit about what some of these cuts have meant for in terms of knife crime. Has austerity generally kind of dragged London down in various ways?
Well, yes and no. It definitely has a relation to the provision of public services. One of the things I say about my own life and my family's life is we benefited from the helping hand our city gave us. So what's the London Promise? The London Promise is you work hard, there's a helping hand, you fulfil your potential. The helping hand we received was a council home, good local state schools, a university that was affordable to us from a working class background, and on and on. And my worry is too many young Londoners haven't got that helping hand. Not a good local school with small class sizes. They can't get affordable housing in London. They can't get the apprenticeships or the funding for the training they need. There aren't the apprenticeships that there were before for somebody from a humble background to make progress. And so austerity's been the cause of those things. And one of the things we want to do from City Hall, the mission of my administration, is to be the helping hand where we can. And your sector is really, really important, because we've now said to the creative industries, as you advise us in relation to what sort of things should a curriculum for young people be? Because one of the biggest complaints I have from employers is, look, we get these graduates and we've got to retrain them. They've not got the skills to work in our industry. So we're getting business involved in devising a curriculum, getting business involved in doing assemblies to inspire young people, but also getting business people from the creative industries in particular who've come from humble backgrounds, women, black, Asian, minority ethnic, disabled, LGBT plus too, go and do assemblies to inspire young Londoners to know they can also, if they work hard, get the helping hand, achieve great things.
What's one thing you would ask the people in this room and in this industry to do to make London a better place?
Be positive. I mean, I genuinely think, I'm not one of these evangelical people who say everything's going to be hunky-dory, without evidence of this. I genuinely think our underlying strengths as a city will still be there if we leave the European Union. I think our growth and wealth and prosperity won't be as great as it could have been, but I still think we are going to be a city that flourishes and thrives. The role you could play is that sort of feel-good factor in relation to, not blind feel-good factor, by the way. Don't be Liam Fox. But based on evidence of your experience of our city, what do you love about our city? We have the best universities in the world, the best arts universities in the world, the best ecosystem. Think of finance, think of culture, think of tech, think of advertising, marketing, and on. That's not going to change. Think of the diversity in relation to different ethnicities and different talent there is. All the things that you love about London aren't going to change. There's a reason why the best ad week in the world is in London. Forget Tokyo, New York and LA. It's here, you know what I mean? And so those things aren't going to change. And so you've got a big role to play because you tell the stories. You decide the images and the posters. You decide the stories that are told in the adverts or the digital marketing. You decide who gets the role. And so you've got a really important role to play in telling that story. And we'll do what we can to help you. One of the things that I said when I ran to be the mayor is I want to be the most pro-business mayor London's ever seen. Why do I say that? Because I realise, and I say this as a left of centre politician, I don't create the jobs, wealth and prosperity that people rely upon. You guys do. What I can do is create an environment where you flourish and thrive. It really is a partnership approach, and one of the things we've tried to do is bring you into City Hall, give us the ideas. The great ones we'll nick and claim the credit for. That's politics. But it's a partnership approach, and I think there is so much dynamism from this industry, and we've got a great relationship with you, and we look forward to that continuing.
I'm obviously an American, so I'm going to sneak in one American politics question. I know you're paying attention to the 2020 race as it shapes up. Anyone you like among the contenders?
I think we were just discussing this before we came, and I think the next president hasn't declared yet, and I think it's not going to be Trump. It can't be Trump. Jeez, it can't.
You said his name at least.
Yeah, I'm quite clear that I think there is. We've got to recognise that those people that voted for Donald Trump and made him president think he's doing an okay job. And one of the challenges, and I say this, and I've got lots of friends in the Democratic Party in America, is you've got to recognise the reasons why people supported him and why people still support him. But one of the mistakes we make as politicians is we only spend time with like-minded people. We're like an echo chamber. And one of the things that I did during my campaign, and I still do as mayor, is I've tried to be a mayor for all Londoners. So, it's important to speak to people who have different views to you, to engage with them, to listen to them, and have that emotional connection. And there's some great people who have announced already in the race, in the primaries. I'm not sure the winning candidate's yet declared. I'm clearly hopeful it's a Democratic candidate that becomes the next president, but it is really exciting. And I say this to you, Lydia, as all Americans here, what happens in America matters for the rest of the world. It really does. And so I'm hoping those Americans who didn't get involved in the last presidential campaign get involved, get registered, get involved, because who the president is affects not just American citizens, it affects all of us. And we're looking forward to we're looking forward to continuing great relations with Americans and American businesses, but it'd be nice to have a good relationship with the president too.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much.
Cheers, thanks, Lydia.